Hello and welcome to ThisConnect. And I'd just like to start off by saying we listen. If you didn't notice last time around, I'd like to point that we are in a slightly different setup. And right up top, I'd like to say if you would like to see something added here, send it over. Right? It's about,
Happy New Year. It's the first podcast of the year.
oh yeah, that too. Don't send us Happy New Year cards now. We've got a long way to use those. Right? But we're talking about something interesting today.
So, this topic actually comes from the audience, MotorInc's family, as it were. And the question that was asked is what is it about ADVs and why are they suddenly everywhere? And I think at the beginning of this year specifically, it's a great thing to talk about because do you know how many ADVs are coming this year?
So I'm going to
The podcast doesn't work if you answer every question by saying you already know. We have to pretend at least that one of us doesn't know.
okay, I'm going to take a guess.
Right.
He wants me to play dummy, basically.
Play means?
All right. In the Indian market, over the course of the next 12 months, I would say at least 6, 7.
Yeah, it's a big number, right? If you start at the top of the sales pyramid, predictably, it will be the Royal Enfield 450.
Right.
Which, if they continue the Himalayan and Scram thing, then eventually it will be a Himalayan 450 and a Scram 450. And hopefully there will be a Dakar 450, which we'll talk about in more detail later. Then there will be the Hero, which I think is a 420 actually. I don't think it's either a 400 or a 450. It's just above 400. That's an ADV. There will be a hardcore off-road version. I don't know if it's the only version with hardcore, but I think there will be 2 versions. Then there is the update to the V-Strom, which is one of my favorite.
Have you started this list in order of what is the hottest in that sense?
Yeah. So at the top of the sales pyramid to me will be the Royal Enfield. Below that should be the Hero. Below that should be, to me, the V-Strom. 650 update. Then there'll be the 800. So there'll be 2 Suzukis, hopefully. Yeah. At the bottom of the list will definitely be the Honda Transalp. Not because it's a terrible motorcycle, but because Honda's pricing will be just out of this world. Yeah. So the wing is the Honda, the big is the price. Right? The jokes have already started and they literally write themselves, right? But let's get straight into it, right? Why do you think ADVs are such a relevant format to India? Because the European context of the ADV is completely different.
Wow, I think India was begging for ADVs.
Still is, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, I think we still don't have enough looking at size of the country, the variety of terrain, the all kinds of riders that you have, right? And experiences or needs, so to speak. I think there's so much more to do just within the ADV form factor, so to speak, right? Is this the starting point? I definitely think this is only the start. There's a long way to go still.
It has to be because practically every small displacement or mid displacement ADV we have, I'm saying 500 and below, they are so suboptimal right now. They are a spark of what it could be, but they are all suboptimal.
But why do you think this ADV rage has kicked off now?
Okay, so the fun part is that the origin of the ADV is from a Yamaha called the TDM 850. It was like the dullest motorcycle ever. But Yamaha realized that there was like a steady process of people buying TDMs. And when their TDM started wearing out 3 lakh kilometers later or whatever, buying another TDM, there was something there. And I understand this a little bit better than normal only because when we went to Yamaha's factory in Iwata, we rode bikes from Tokyo to Iwata. And the last bike I rode was the TDM because who wants to ride the TDM, right? It's like this dull, fat looking thing.
It was quick interjection. The first big bike that I properly rode was a TDM, the 900.
Really?
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so this evening, I've been riding FJR 400, FJR 1300, whatever, and it's been fun, right? XJRs, whatever. VMAX, all that. In the evening, it got cold. And at that point, I had the TDM. Right? So I had a screen. I was sitting comfortably and upright rather than hunched in the cold. Then I discovered heated grips were there, so I turned on the heated grips. So when we got to Iwata, all the Indian riders were suffering a little bit. We were very happy. Don't get us wrong. It was not like we're like, oh God, where are we? We were all having a great time. I was having a great time and I was super comfortable.
Right.
And I understood at that point that there was a different way to think about ADVs as a format.
Right.
But what's happened since in Europe is the GS is the largest selling ADV in Europe, right? And the Germany being their largest market. And in Germany, the average age is 57. I don't think a 57-year-old person can crouch into a sports bike as a routine anymore. I don't think that's physically possible. So they want the thrills, they want all the tech, they want all the safety systems, but they're physically unable to contort themselves into the shapes that other formats require them to.
Right.
So you end up with an ADV.
Right.
India is full of youngsters. And that's, to me, is amazing to think about. An old man's motorcycle from Europe is going to be the spark that kicks off effectively a motorcycle revolution powered by the youth in India is what really excites me. Right. And that's why I get frustrated with what is called an ADV in India right now, because they're all just 1 to 15 steps short of, wow, okay, now it starts
1
to
to
work.
15, huh?
Think about it, right? If you buy an Xpulse, it does so many things correctly, but it's a 200. So on the highway, 100, it's spent.
Yeah.
Okay, 100 on a highway in India is not slow.
And it's not even 200 enough for me.
Right. So, because my perspective on touring is you need motorcycles that have a top speed of about 160 to be able to tour well in India, not because you're going to go 160 everywhere.
Correct.
Because 100 as a percentage of 160 is insignificant, so the machine will feel like, yeah, Correct. This is a reasonable amount of work. It's not too slow, it's not too fast, we're in a sweet spot. That's why the motorcycle behind you works so well on the highway.
Right.
Because between about 95 to 120-ish, the KTM feels like settled.
It's humming along.
It's humming along. And you want that feeling, right?
Right.
So if you remember when we tested the 390 Adventure together, I think it was a power drift story.
Right.
The reason why we didn't like the 390 Adventure is on the highway, it didn't settle. The engine settled, but the suspension was interrupting you. On the 390, 250 Adventure, both we have suspension issues. The engine is there, the space is there. And today somebody says, luggage bhi chahiye, pillion bhi chahiye, what do I buy? You don't have a choice. You have to steer them to this KTM. But the KTM I'm waiting for is the 2025 390 Adventure.
That far away, huh?
Yeah, because see, that time they will reinvent the frame again. The problem is the frame. Remember, you brought this out when we did the 390 Adventure versus 390 Duke discussion, where you said, look, it's a tall motorcycle with a tall engine on which there is a tall seat height, and then you want tall ground clearance. You'll need a ladder to get onto that motorcycle. How do you solve that? You start with a frame that has a cutout for the seat, which brings the seat back into a reasonable height. That's 2025 390 Adventure. That's the one that is going to be optimal. 47 odd bhp that bike will be, because it'll have the new 390cc engine. That's the 399, I think. So it'll be just under 400cc, 47 bhp, lots of torque, a reasonable seat height, that kind of space. If I had a fast forward button, just get you to 2025 now. And wish you 2 happy new years along the way.
No, we've got two other fantastic motorcycles. I don't want to fast forward those.
Yeah.
I'd like to get there.
Right?
In time.
So to me, that 160 top speed, the 100 cruise, and a lot of space is what the ADV brings. But if you think about it, I put 60,000 odd 55,000 kilometers on my Multistrada.
Right.
And at that point, I had the KTM in my garage and the Tuono, and the Multi was getting used the most.
Right.
And not just outside on the highway, it was used on the streets every day for commuting with panniers. And it went to the racetrack, where at least on one occasion, I forgot to remove the panniers and rode it anyway.
I've seen that pic.
Yeah. You know the obvious reason why? When I take that Ducati out of the garage and point it down a road, anywhere in this country, there's like a very good chance we'll come out the other side without having to worry about what's between here and there.
Right.
And to me, that is the key to touring motorcycles in India. Right. And that's why ADVs to me are the perfect touring format, until we have so many good roads in the country that this is no longer a consideration.
Right. So for me, I think the ADV turnaround, so to speak, and even globally, there is a turnaround for ADVs. ADVs are more and more the format that people seem to prefer, the ergonomic standpoint. I think also from a rider standpoint, what has happened is that engineering has changed so much. The thought process, not just the hardware that goes into it, even the engineering that's going into it, has changed so much that traditionally the sport bike guy would look down at an ADV, saying that it's not sporty enough.
Only metaphorically, because the ADV guy will always look down on you, and literally.
Yeah. So the sports bike guy would look at it and say, it's not going to be quick enough, I'm going to smoke him. right? Whereas now the kind of ADVs you have, so in terms of the performance envelope, they've gone.
Yeah.
It's massive.
It's a universe now.
It's huge. It envelopes so many categories in that sense. So that one part of it, and the versatility again has gotten so much better because along with them also getting more performance, they've also become nicer, right?
Yeah, and I think, before all this tech happened, and a lot of people say tech in motorcycles is a bad idea, but in certain place it is a great idea because earlier, making a versatile motorcycle required you to have compromises on various aspects, If you wanted it really comfortable, then you couldn't have it really sharp. And if you wanted long distance, then you couldn't make it commute. If you wanted to commute, then you'd have to say it can't be very powerful because the engine will heat up, right? Today, you're beginning to see all of those little bits fall into place where a large range of ability doesn't necessarily mean something has to be absolutely terrible or unlivable with.
In fact, it's the opposite. I think they are bringing in everything that's the best of all the worlds and making it this one motorcycle that's like, I can do everything with it.
And you know why?
Do it all.
And you know why? It's so easy to do in terms of packaging because an ADV is just physically
Larger, yeah.
Right? I remember reading that making a street fighter was a big challenge compared to a sports bike because a sports bike has plastics, so you can hide literally shit behind it and not have to design those parts.
Not that it's there on the Street Fighter.
Right? No. Street Fighter is a category, not the Ducati. But all that wiring, all the filthiness is behind a piece of plastic on a sports bike. So it's just easier to do a street fighter, a sports bike. Street Fighters, more complicated challenge.
Right.
But they are physically small motorcycles. So when Ducati did the variable valve timing system on the 1200s and the 1260s, why didn't they do it on the Panigale? No space. The weight penalties were too high. So what became the most electronically and mechanically advanced motorcycle in the Ducati pantheon at that time became the Multistrada. It was large enough to carry all of that around, right? It's almost reverse trend to see that the V4 has gone from the Panigale back to the Multistrada. But it's just a physically larger motorcycle, which means you can just put more into it and then you can do more with it.
Right.
And if I give you a reference of my Multistrada, if you told me 2 years ago that you would own a motorcycle with a 19-inch front wheel as a 99% road rider who goes to the racetrack regularly, I'd have told you to get lost, right? Today, I'm on the other side of that where I say, hey, the 19-inch wheel is not in my way, but if I am hitting a trail, which usually is between two good roads, if I'm hitting that trail, I do have the right wheel size to be able to deal with that.
Right.
And Ducati has somehow figured out how to get the balance done. And that balance to me is what ADVs are about.
Absolutely.
Right? I can't wait for the guys who've been touring on R15s and smaller machines and full points to them for being outside and enjoying their motorcycles.
Wow.
The upgrade that will come when you get a ADV, you're going to Ladakh and that bike hasn't disappeared under your own luggage. Right? And when you're not scratching your head about me and my wife want to go for a ride or me and my partner want to go for a ride, where do I get the saddlebags, the tail bag, the tank bag,
fitted on,
the girl or boy who's going to sit behind? How am I going to travel?
Correct.
With 50 bhp, it's not really a challenge anymore.
Right.
And that will be so kick-ass.
I think we are in that sweet spot as a community that's living with motorcycles, looking to the next one, because we've gone from 150cc as being the epitome of performance.
Correct.
We have moved up. We've gone past 200s. We're into the 300s, 350s, and going higher. So I think having ADVs with a, let's say, 100, 150cc engine was, you couldn't really do that fully.
Also, I think some of the ADVs that we got in that category, like the Pulsar AS 150 and all of that, there was no ADV in it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a moment to understand what the ADV is supposed to do. It's a touring motorcycle first. Today, they come in multiple flavors. You get the road tourers, which have 17-inch wheels, like the Versys.
Right.
You get the off-road ADVs, which have the 21-inch front wheels, which say the Xpulse Rally Kit. But the fundamental idea is some off-road ability and some touring ability takes precedence over everything else.
Correct.
Can you really take a large 150cc motorcycle touring? And if you can't, then it fundamentally has a conflict with the idea of the ADV.
Like you were saying about the R15, like people will take anything, but the spirit of that ADV format is that you should be able to do that endlessly and in that Zen state of mind.
Yes.
Which which is a magical state of mind to be in, and not being crouched down, not having to think about bad roads or what's around the next corner from a surface standpoint, or even if the road ends. I think that sense of ease and flexibility is fantastic.
Yeah, which is why for me, the V-Strom 250, for example, which is again a quasi ADV sitting there, if it had more actual suspension travel and a little bit, say, lower gearing for torque, assuming that the rider would be able to understand as a mature rider that I can't have a 250 and very high highway speeds, but I can have the ability to continue to accelerate well and overtake well, even though I have a small engine, because my gearing is, say, 5% lower. Might have been a better bike. But if you plant that as the idea of an ADV, I think you're doing a little bit of a disservice to the rider, because you're showing him almost a false picture. It is the right direction.
Correct.
But it's not the right picture.
It's the baby step.
To me, the Xpulse therefore is a little bit more honest, because it at least says कि देखो, ability is not about engine performance. 200 है, कितना करेगा? But जो कर रहा है उसको देख करके देखो. So why the tall seat height? Why that narrow seat? Okay, we have off-road ambition. It gets much hardcore when you go to the rally kit. Okay, good idea. And the fact that Hero continues to do the rally kit, I think, is admirable. Because as a large commercial organization selling 5 lakh units a month, if they didn't do the rally kit, it would still be the same, right? What difference would it make? But on the flip side, when you see the larger ADVs, and I know that a lot of this audience will take a while to get there, the expansion of that envelope, it just changes everything. You remember when Akshay Milan Jadhav got his V-Strom 650?
Right.
He put 38,000 kilometers in the first year on that machine.
Yeah.
And you know how much work he did on that motorcycle to keep it running? Nothing. He just ran. I mean, he put his aluminum boxes or whatever, and he just went.
He just switched tires. Yeah.
He just gave it tires and just ran. That was more or less my experience with the Multistrada as well.
Right.
And that went to the racetrack and it lapped, once with luggage. It went down the highway at the drop of a hat. And all I did to prep for 2 hours was check the major engine bolts, check that the chain is lubed and tight, and we are good to go. Right. That kind of free, easy, don't even think about it. Do you think other formats of motorcycles would allow it? That ease of use, that being able to just do stuff with it without thinking, are there other formats that would allow you to unlock that?
Not as much as this. Like,
why? I mean, I'm asking you specifically because when you had a chance to buy a big bike, what you ended up with was your dream bike, which was the Hayabusa. Your other bike is an Impulse.
Right.
And you've obviously tested everything in the middle. So why did you end up with the Busa? And why do you think the ADV has something special about being able to just give you that free rein, as it were? Why do you think that there is something special about ADVs?
So like you said, I think the flexibility, the sense of adventure. I think we have to also recognize that a lot of people who are buying these may not be experienced riders. So having the motorcycle there to back you up so often, right? Not having to worry about so many things because it's an ADV. I think that gives a sense of ease, a confidence, which is so important, right? The headspace that you're in. I think that makes them very appealing. And I think the other big thing, like we were talking about design, that has changed is that they have become accessible, right? You were talking about seat height. Today, seat heights for ADVs are accessible, right? Yeah. I think Royal Enfield did that beautifully with the Himalayan. Despite giving all that suspension travel and all of that, seat height, 800 mm. I think that's why it has such a big fan following as well, right? So that ease has what has powered this ADV drive, because you're not getting these lumbering heavy machines. And if you remember earlier when we talk about handling and all, and we were using an ADV, we'd say, yeah, it has that top heavy feel, right? When you're going into a corner. Today, not at all. So all the demerits, so to speak, have been kind of done away with, and all the best bits have been pulled into this format, right? So I think that works beautifully, even in the city, right? We talk about turning radius. Yeah, ADV is meant to have fantastic lock-to-lock, and which means they're maneuverable.
Also, I think most people don't understand how much of an advantage just sitting higher in traffic is. To be able to see over the cars rather than having to sort of see through them is a huge advantage. I remember this one ride. I was going from my house in Powai in Mumbai to the Triumph dealership, which is at the end of the JVLR, which is a fairly crowded road.
Right.
And I was riding the Tiger back, and I was literally slamming it through traffic without ever feeling like I was being frantic or angry about it. I would just find a gap, and get through.
Because the view is that much further down.
When I parked the bike, it was one of the off-road, the Rally Pro equivalents. It was in the 800 days. XCX or whatever. And I realized that what happened is I got over the cars. And then I would look down into gaps, and then I'd see gaps farther out. And it just
Right.
made my riding so much easier. What I had done that day was I'd left my KTM there.
Yeah.
So on the way back, on the same road in the opposite direction, I was on a much lower motorcycle. And that KTM is a kick-ass motorcycle through traffic. But I realized that suddenly I had a realization that I'm missing the view from the top.
Correct.
Right? So I take these multis out with the panniers on. And the reason why it is so natural to me is not just that I've, 50,000 kilometers with panniers in traffic.
Right.
It's the fact that I'm above and I'm looking at the gaps way earlier. So I can figure out how to make a lane change, get this giant thing to fit. And after 5,000 kilometers, I don't even notice how large that thing is until I have to park it outside the studio or whatever.
So this, I call ADVs the SUV effect for two-wheelers.
The soccer mom of two-wheelers, is it?
In a way, because see the same thing, this being able to sit higher, that sense of having a great view. It's the first rule of, what they teach you on the track, right?
Yeah.
Look where you want to go, look far, right? And that's what ADVs inherently do. That's what SUVs inherently do, which is why when you see most new drivers, they want an SUV from that standpoint because they say, I feel confident, right? It's about the view. How much more your information is your mind getting so that it can plan ahead. It's as simple as that. And that I think works for cars, it works for two-wheelers, and it's something you cannot take away. And even in cars, like with motorcycles, I think SUVs have got this popularity now because they've done away with the demerits of an SUV, which is big, lumbering, heavy, and fuel, not as efficient. They become city-friendly. They become light, manageable. So that effect you can see even over there, right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about the V-Strom, right, as not being a true ADV, which is, I think, the norm in the SUV world, right? But it's built a product which satisfies a mental, psychological need while having certain advantages in the real world, like with ground clearance and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So there is that advantage.
No, and in fact, what I enjoyed about the V-Strom is I rode it quite a bit, including at the racetrack again, where I jumped a corner. I think Rishabh was behind me at that point of time, Rishabh Bhaskar. And he came back to pit lane saying, that's not fair, because I think we're going from turn 2 to 3 at Curry, which is like a left and right. And basically I saw that the curve was ramped, right?
Right.
So instead of turning left at the end, I basically jumped it straight through, landed on the other side and went for it. So I gained, I think, 5 bike lengths on him. I was, yeah.
You want to make the curbs high? Go ahead.
Correct, right? And he was like, that's not fair. I said, but I'm riding an ADV at a racetrack that is working remarkably well. Why won't I do it?
Right.
Right? And when you took it out into traffic, the idea that it has to do off-roading means low gearing and torque, which makes traffic so simple.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? It's like none of the Ducatis, the V-Strom, none of these motorcycles stall at low revs. If you just allow them to be, they stumble once and then they just hold that speed. Right? TVS, I think, does something similar, and they call it glide-through technology, where the ECU actually intervenes to not let it stall. But Suzuki's had an anti-stall system for a long time now. Right? Ducatis have so much torque at the bottom that they generally don't stall, which is true for all. Actually, think about most SUVs also don't stall right off the bottom. So in traffic, you just let the clutch go, let the throttle go, figure out what those speeds are. So I know that it's about 11 for the Ducati, and it used to be 13 for the previous Multistrada. I know what the 210 speed is. I know what the KTM speed is. Just let them be. And then they flow with traffic with like zero input from here. It's all automatic. You go up to second and it'll pick up 5 or 8 kmph. You'll know that number. It's just a matter of time. And on an ADV, it just feels like the most natural thing to do. You're rolling along in traffic. No inputs at all.
A little bit for those of you who are out there riding adventure motorcycles and are going off-roading. I think people, you always buy into the imagery of the sport, right?
Yeah.
And you see that it's hard work and all of that. I think people need to understand that it doesn't have to feel that way. That is dependent on the motorcycle. And if you feel that something is asking you to work harder, means maybe the motorcycle is not working that well. And therefore,
or there is an opportunity to learn, so don't discount it.
Yeah, that too. But there is that difference within the adventure world. Like we're talking about on-road behavior, off-road behavior.
Also, don't get caught up in the marketing. Okay, now you look at the Ducati V4's marketing campaign. Right. That dude is pasting that giant ADV through everything.
Right.
Do you know who that guy is? His name is Andrea Kairosi. He's a race winning, championship winning type rider who's also nearly 7 feet tall. Okay. Kairosi does a lot of stuff that is extremely simple for him, and it is years of work for you, right?
Non-stop.
Yeah, so if you're going to say, I want to go off-road, so let me get the Multistrada V4 Rally or a 890 Adventure R, remember that the bike comes with skills, but you don't automatically acquire those skills when you write the check. So you are going to have to spend time learning, and at the racetrack, you could buy a really fast machine and get on with it. Off-road, it's the curve ramps so hard that an Xpulse will probably teach you more than your Tiger 800 will. Even if you think of the Xpulse as a learning expense.
Right.
Whatever, I'll spend 14 lakh rupees by an ADV, and I'll spend 1.5 lakh rupees on an Xpulse, another 30,000 rupees on schools to bring my skill up so that at least I can do 30% of what the Tiger is offering out of the showroom. Right.
Right.
Also, sorry,
Go
there is a little bit of equipment in there too. Kairos is not riding your road tires. He's not on Scorpion trails, right?
Yeah.
So Ducati does say that Scorpion STRs or Scorpion rallies are also available as homologated options. But you can bet that when Kairosi does those strange things out off-road, he's got the right tires
Pressures.
and tire pressures and a lot of years of knowledge of saying, this is how I use the throttle to manage the weight of the bike, which we will take years to learn.
It's the same parallel. Like for me, he trips my mind out. He blows. I mean, like, I am just stunned. Paul Torres, right, with the Tenere.
Yeah.
He makes it look like he's riding a dirt bike,
Yeah.
And it's a Tenere. It's not a small motorcycle. And the stuff he does with it is just insane. Tony Boo, right, with the Africa Twin.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like you look at them and you think, हाँ, ये मैं कर सकता हूँ. Like, नहीं, तू ये नहीं कर सकता.
नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन उसका result वो नहीं आएगा. So Tony Boo goes up a rock like this and lands on top. We go up a rock like this and land in hospital.
Just make sure the rock is positioned really well. So when you go over and land on the other side, they're ready for you.
Paul Torres also has a professional spotter who says, this is the line you take and this is where you land. We've got a guy saying, ha bro, aja.
And he's also so open. Like he talks about, like, I think he just did a year-ender, talking about how the year's been tough for him with a lot of injuries. We don't see that, right?
No.
We don't see that. It's very rare.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of work that goes into getting your ADV skills up.
Yeah.
And it's better to do it slowly, gradually.
Yeah, and my point is, I'm not a skilled off-road rider at all, and I have a Multistrada V4, right? I have tested a whole bunch of ADVs. And I understand that 90% of us will not actually ever go off-road beyond needing to get to a place and there is a dirt road on the way. Just do it slowly.
Absolutely.
Okay, there was a very powerful off-road learning film. It says everybody goes off-road. The skilled guy reaches first and has to wait for the slow guy to arrive. There is no other difference. Right? So think about it like this, right? You've ridden a little bit of off-road. I haven't. And we decide to go camping in the middle of absolutely nowhere. If I reach second, which I will because I can't ride as fast as you, you get to set up camp and wait for me. My work is reduced because I already did all the work on the trail, just getting to where you did easily, right? First. The second thing I realized as I tested more and more and more is if 80-90% of the people are never going to leave the road, then the important question to answer in a test is how does it do on road, assuming that it will do something off-road. And it's very, very good news that most ADVs do the road really well. Yeah, it's not like the manufacturers have forgotten that a lot of the off-roading belongs in the marketing films and a lot of the roading is part of how the bike was designed in the first place. Right? I think the only people who I've heard as an exception to this, and not that their bikes are bad, is the KTM product team, which I've referred to you before, where they say our adventure motorcycles start as dirt bikes. And then we calm them down to make them good road bikes. Is how the entire 1090, 1290, the Super Adventure, all of those were designed.
Not the 390 for sure.
The next 390 will also come from the same philosophy. So they called it out as the outlier. And we know from testing that it is the outlier and that will get fixed in 2 years' time as well. But imagine a whole bunch of touring riders having access to nice, highway-worthy, capable adventure tourers. I think this whole struggle to go to Ladakh business will be a part of our past.
Yeah.
You know how they say that, there is this road, it is off-road for 30 kilometers, you'll really struggle. Some of it is equipment.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not knocking the Classic, which is one of your favorite motorcycles, but imagine if you'd done the Astral ride on the Himalayan 450.
Wow.
You'd see all of that, you'd do all of that, but it won't feel like I had to work very hard for that.
Yeah.
It had to work. It was okay.
That would be, I think, if I'm excited about one of the ADVs, the 450 from Royal Enfield is definitely one of them, because the philosophy that they're following is about accessible motorcycles, and we've seen what they've done with the Himalayan. I'm holding them to a very high standard in that sense, and I hope they deliver. Sometimes, like with the Hunter, it's like every now and then you see that, okay, they can make mistakes,
But
which
no,
is worrying.
I think the Hunter mistake is, you have this word that you like to use a lot, LHF, low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And I think the Hunter project became low hanging fruit in the J series Classic 350 thing, where core classic चाहिए,
Right.
उसके बाद में meteor चाहिए, existing platforms, existing fan base known है,
Correct.
extension ठीक है, एक Hunter बना लेते हैं. And I don't think they paid as much attention to the Hunter as they did to the other motorcycles, and there's the problem. To me, the Himalayan, they will not. They are too smart a company to make that mistake again.
I hope so, and I certainly expect so. But just on the off chance, I'm protecting myself emotionally by saying that it's possible. It's possible. Well, the Hunter let me down, but it's possible. So therefore, but I'm expecting that getting the Himalayan 450 wrong would be a disaster.
No, it has to go to the Dakar. They can't get it wrong.
Yeah. So in that sense, getting that kind of a motorcycle to not just the Indian market, and today this evolution is global.
Yes.
People want friendlier motorcycles, and the ADVs fit in so well on a global scale, right? The biggest worry for the developed markets was that, hey, people are not riding, right? They don't want motorcycles because they find it too intimidating, and the ADVs just come in and say, well, whatever you want, we can do it.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And we'll make it easier for you.
Yeah,
right?
no, in fact, the Dakar project is interesting for me. Let me rewind a little bit. Royal Enfield has not said anything about the Dakar, okay, officially.
Yeah.
Nani Roma was there at Ridermania this year.
CS Santosh.
CS Santosh was there. Indications are that the Himalayan 450 will be a 450cc class, which is the motorcycle class now.
That's why it's a 450.
If there's one company on earth who have the resources to put together a team and then run their own bike with a reasonable expectation of at least finishing, if not winning, I think it would be Royal Enfield, right? Give them, I would say, 3 years of time from now. So 3 years from now, 3 years from the bike being launched, I think is the Dakar that they will attack. And I don't think they'll go half-assed at it, right? So if they make a decent adventure tourer, which I think they will, chances are, and then they raise the bar by creating a Dakar spec machine, and then not shying away from selling that to customers who walk in and say, hey, I want the street version of the Dakar bike. I think you have like a pot of gold at that end of that rainbow. Then there's Hero. People don't give Hero enough credit for what they've managed to do in the premium segment. I mean, I'm not saying that the Xpulse is flawless, but is the Xpulse frame something to admire?
Oh man, I'm an Impulse owner.
Yeah.
And I completely get what the Xpulse has done better than the Impulse.
Yeah.
Because the kind of confidence that frame gives you when you're doing, like you hit something big or you hit a jump or something like that, the way it works is...
And that's a stock one without paying 40,000 rupees extra for the rally kit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Imagine that level of capability being translated to a 400, 420, 450cc engine. I think that will be another kick-ass machine, right? 2 solid, on-budget ADVs incoming for sure. We know the 390 Adventure will be pricey, but in 2025, you'll get the Austrian version of what an off-road capable tour enduro should be. Right? Hopefully, they'll do a 390 Adventure R, which will be even more off-road focused.
I think we can be pretty sure that's going to happen.
Right? And then KTM India will not get in the way of trying to sell it in India and all of that drama, right? Because I think they are the they are the least courageous of all the courageous brands. I mean, we look at Yamaha, KTM as brands that are out there doing out there things for enthusiasts. KTM somehow has a wall. It ends at the end of, it's halfway between Mattighofen and India. Right? And nothing from that side shall come to this side. Right? I hope that by then that wall has broken and KTM has understood that there are serious enthusiasts here, maybe in small numbers, but it is commercially viable to attack those guys. Then in the middle, you'll get Versys, road going, V-Strom, off-road and on-road going. Above that, the V-Strom 800, more options. Transalp 750, still more options, ridiculous pricing, but Honda service is really cheap, so there might be a reason to think about it. Above that, you've got the Tigers.
And what's your take on all the new brands that are coming in, like the Zontes and the likes?
I have low faith. Let me be absolutely clear. I think the TRK was an exceptionally dull motorcycle, and I don't think value for money is a great reason to buy motorcycles ever. That ends at the day you've left the showroom. It has to start after that. The life starts after that. So, would I recommend a TRK? No. I don't think it's worth buying. The Leoncino, I think, is not that off-roady, but it was a slightly more pleasant motorcycle to ride because the TRK was just so heavy.
Absolutely.
Right? This Zontes, I haven't even seen the motorcycles properly yet, except at, I think, India Bike Week at the stand, we went and walked around on it. And they look a little gizmo-y and flashy. Is that backed up by actual substance? I can only find out once we test it, and we haven't. So I don't have an opinion on it. See, if I'm going to say reliable bhi hona chahiye, girega to kuch nahi hona chahiye, and it should be easy and confident, who's more likely to get it right?
Right.
It's the established brands who've done this for a while who understand how the
Exactly,
balance is
because
created.
most people right now, like let's say, would be in your shoes, not even in your shoes, in that sense that they wouldn't have ridden a Zontes or do not have any exposure to where it's coming from. But it looks attractive. It's priced well. So
And it's got YouTube on it.
Is that a bad thing?
No, it's a great thing. Let's stop riding our bikes. Just put large screens in front of us and just watch that the whole day.
He hates it.
No, dude, I can't wait to trade in my KTM and get a 100-inch TV instead. I mean, have you seen the handling of 100-inch TVs today? They are incredible in the corners.
Oh wow, yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be amazing.
I can't roll my eyes hard enough because they'll pop right out of my head. Okay, this has gone a long. This has become long. So let's wrap this up. I think the biggest thing about ADVs is what you said. It's the confidence thing. There are motorcycles that appear large, which is good for our status. Appear large, which is good for riding with pillions and luggage. They appear large, which is good for putting technology into them. But we've figured out how to make them non-intimidating while they are large. So you look at it and say, oh my God, that's a large bike. And then you'll get on it and say, oh, it's not such a large bike.
Right.
That's one. I think the second key point is they're versatile. You can ride them really fast up a twisty. You can go peacefully down a highway for hours and hours and hours.
Right.
And you can go through traffic enjoying a viewpoint which very few other motorcycles have access to.
Right.
Third, we've had suboptimal ADVs so far. So you've seen glimpses of what is greatness, at least at the bottom, the mass market. And I think that changes in 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Definitely.
I think it's going to be a happy new year.
You were just complaining about 2023 in the previous podcast, and suddenly you're all choppy about it, huh?
That's because you were discussing cars with me. I always get
And
pretty and crabby
prices.
when you're talking about cars. You bring bikes in, we are so good. Life is so good.
So fair, right?
And I think now that I've been called out in public, we should disconnect. So this is ThisConnect.